You're listening to KWOU. Coming up next, the amazing, unbelievable adventures of Dr. Theophilius Crux, Ph.D., and his faithful companion Archibald the Tasmanian emu. It's gonna be okay. I know it's hard to believe that sometimes, but it's going to be okay, whether you like it or not. Hi, I am, in fact, Jasper Beck, and this is the amazing, unbelievable adventures of Dr. Theophilius Crux, Ph.D., and his faithful companion Archibald the Tasmanian emu. Previously, in this unbelievable tale, we were all having doubts about the legitimacy of storytelling as a method of telling a story, and that led us down some very dark alleys in the town of Nexeneth, in which we discovered a semblance of ourselves, but assembled a shelf on which to set our lives, a shelf life, if you will. I myself have a severe allergy to shelf life, so to avoid a breakout, breakdown, or break up, we shall wander back to the narrative once again, and drink of its sweet, sweet linear waters. Where has Luce gone? Well, he's gone fishing. Not in any body of water, mind you, not even in the mind of water. Why would you even think that? You know full well that the desert that surrounds the once shining city of Billsworth Bridges extends far enough to encompass Nexeneth as well. How else do you explain the twang in all the characters' voices? Gosh darn it, didn't I tell you the sky was purple and the land was flat? What else do you think I could have been describing? No, really, what were you thinking? I'm only ever able to imagine the desert, and if you got something different, that may mean that there's an escape from all of this. Of course, you won't tell me. You want to keep it to yourself. Well, two can play that game. I guess I won't tell you where Luce is fishing. I can see him now, but I am by no means obligated to give you anything. Alright, fine, I'll admit the power dynamics in this relationship are not exactly equal. I'll also admit that Luce is fishing in the void. He's dangling his feet off the edge, feeling the untingle of non-existence, his pole bobbing down and down. He yawns. Only a fool would expect to catch something while fishing in nothing, but it's been well established that Luce is principally a fool. If we define foolishness as the unwise attachment from the reality of the situation, we have loosely defined Luce. Even now he is detached from his detachment, existing on a plane so high above being grounded that it has forgotten the form and function of a landing strip. He's in the jet stream, and the jet's dreaming about aluminum sheep. Only a fool expects to catch something in nothing, says a beetle-shaped fellow, setting himself down next to Luce. He dusts off his mustard-yellow polo and pulls his polished pole out from under him, and gives it a good cast like his uncle used to do. Oh, I know, said Luce, reiterating verbatim what the narrator had just said. But though I am a fool, you wrongly assume that that means I have to be expecting to catch something. Well, what are you expecting to catch? Well, I'm not expecting to catch anything. I'm not expecting at all. What do you think fishing is about, anyway? Catching things? Luce scoffs. No! Catching is about catching things. I see you now, Mr. Beetleman. You're a catcher. I'm a fisher. I fish for things. I don't wish for things. The Beetleman scratched his carapace. But, Mr. Fisherman, if you're not fishing to catch something, what are you fishing for? Luce let out a long sigh to keep from saying, myself. And once the word had drifted away on his breath and into the void, he mustered a terse, nothing. I'm fishing for nothing. And that's exactly what Luce caught. Nothing yanked hard on his line, and he fell shins over shoulders into the chasm, screaming to keep from sighing in relief. Didn't you know, Luce, you fool of a mildly sad man, that if you fish long enough in the void fishes for you? The beetle-shaped man did not know what to do, so, unlike most others, he sat and thought about it for a while, letting the narrative pan away towards an imposing office building jutting above the Nexeneth skyline. The camera cuts to a labyrinth of lifeless office coffinicles, and we, as the viewers, assume that they reside within the aforementioned imposing office building, when, in fact, they are in a completely different one across the street. This particular building has very strict policies against filming its exterior, so we have to make do with the footage we were allowed. In any case, the camera cuts once more to the interior of a single coffinicle, where two vampires are currently having an austere and auburn-tinted meeting. "You can't keep doing this, Matt Brown," said the woman in gray, implied to be an authority figure. "Doing what?" says Matt Brown, explicitly stated to be Matt Brown. "Beginning dialogue in media res." "Well, I don't trust the media." "Well, I don't either, but it's Latin. In media res, in the middle of things. You think it's compelling, but really it's just confusing. What did I even say to you when this meeting started?" "I don't know, Sharon, I really don't. But it's not because I began the dialogue on medium heat or whatever. I just don't remember. It clearly wasn't very interesting. Can I leave now?" "You may not. We're here to talk about your adherence to company guidelines, or lack thereof. It says here on your file that you have over 100 recorded instances of unauthorized service provisioning. Drop the jargon, Sharon. Killing people. I kill people. That's what vampires do. Don't call me Sharon. That's not even remotely close to my name. Why are you calling me Sharon?" "Because Sharon is Karen, and Matt Brown is not Karen. About this meeting. At all. Look, I understand that I have a bazillion company violations. I admit it, but zooming in from the big picture, Sharon. So what? What are you, specifically you, going to do? Do you even want to be here? I'm appealing to you existentially, Sharon. Look me in the eye and say with a straight face that you actually believe in the significance of enforcing company policy. And you have every right to fool yourself in that regard, but I'm going to take a wild guess that you'd rather be self-consistent than self-denying. That you'd rather be a loose cannon like me than the powerhouse of this cell you've locked yourself in. That you'd rather be a vampire." The woman in gray, whose name was actually Augustine, rose from her seat. "You do realize that by heavily persuading me to self-actualize, you're kind of undermining your own message, right?" "I don't have a message, whatever your name is. I have a life. An unlife, to be specific and self-contradictory. And right now, that involves literally and literarily antagonizing a pair of losers currently bouncing around the city like some kind of two-player pinball machine. Actually, that sounds pretty cool. That's gotta be a thing in Parabolippolis. We should make that the explicit reason for going there next. I digress, Miss Woman in Gray. That's what I do. Would you like to digress with me?" Augustine stared out the tinted window into the soulless voids of the coffinical workers. "Want to go kill corporate first?" "Seize the 119 days. Where to?" And all afternoon, the howls of executive board members could be heard over the sound of sirens, improvised plastic explosives, and Beethoven's oft overlooked 11th and a half symphony. The camera then pans upwards to center on the sun, indicating the ambiguous passage of time and signifying the presence of intense heat, making a strange hissing sound that the sun doesn't really make in actuality. Nevertheless, the desert does not care about actuality, for it is well known that the hotter a place is, the less real it is. The opposite is true as well, but the desert doesn't care about opposites or truth. The desert doesn't care about anything, come to think of it, besides cacti and fantasy sports and that sort of high and lonesome feeling you get standing on a plateau. But nothing else. Certainly not main characters as they traipse around. All you can do in a desert is traipse around. Yet despite all that, that's exactly what Mrs. Hatter was doing. She had finally outrun the city after her encounter with Grandma, and now there was nothing left to outrun. The void was far enough away that she didn't have to think about it, as was the seemingly inevitable end of the world and the capital I important hut cluster. She didn't have to think about them, which is exactly what she wants. Not that that means she isn't thinking about them. On the contrary, they're playing on constant loop through her mind, but at the very least, it's of her own volition, whatever that means. Looks are important to Mrs. Hatter. She looks around. She looks for a sign of shelter. She looks tired. So tired, in fact, that she does not immediately believe her eyes when, soaring over the horizon, she spies a newborn vampire named Fuchsia. Fuchsia, who has a different perspective now, both from her talk with her creator and from her current aerial vantage point, swoops down to chat. Hi! Hi. I'm Fuchsia, says Fuchsia, extending a hand. Well, nice to meet you, Fuchsia. Ta-ta. Mrs. Hatter walks around her. Fuchsia watches her go for a moment. The desert did not care about manners, and frankly she didn't either, but she had turned a new leaf, and there was a cool bug on the other side. Cool bugs are not to be denied. She flew after her. Stop running. Go away. Stop running, she said with her mouth of mesmerization, for it is well known that newborn vampires manifest a unique set of unnatural abilities that reflect the situations they find themselves in while still developing. That makes sense, says the desert tortoise, not mattering. Mrs. Hatter obeyed her momentary master. She growled, I don't like being told what to do. None of us do, that's the whole point. I assume you're angry at Jasper? Who? The author. The narrator, actually. It doesn't make a difference, they're all his anyway. Look, being angry isn't going to get you anywhere. I don't want to get anywhere. The wind howled sand into her empty words. What do you want? Seems to me you're dead set on not wanting whatever you're given. I don't know what I want. I want to know what I want. Don't we all? I think that's a step in the right direction, though. You do know what you want. You know you want to know what you want, which is something that you know that you want, and so on. I know it's a little meta, but beggars can't be choosers. Are you here to kill me? No. I think I'm here to save you, or at least help you. All we do know is that I'm here, so let's try this again. Fuchsia extends a hand. I'm Fuchsia. Mrs. Hatter reciprocates. Mrs. Hatter. No first name? No last name? Well, fair enough. If I may ask, Mrs. Hatter, what are you running from? She let out a long sigh to keep from saying, myself. And once the word had drifted away on the gritty desert winds, she mustered a terse, my story. I'm running from my story. It's funny you should say that, because just yesterday I began running towards my story, so maybe us meeting each other here is part of a larger narrative that encompasses both our individual acceptance and rejection of character growth, respectively and respectfully. Mrs. Hatter rubbed her eyes. Do all vampires talk too much? Couldn't tell you, I just got the job yesterday, and I don't plan on being a conventional vampire anyhow. I know what it's like to be thirsty, it doesn't bother me much anymore. Well then, Fuchsia, if we are to travel together for the moment, would you mind flying me back to Nexeneth? I've been traveling with a pair of losers currently bouncing around that city like hyperactive homicidal squirrels, and the longer they're out of my sight, the more likely the Nexenethians are to contemplate hurling themselves into the void to save themselves the trouble. Nowhere else to be, unless that somewhere else had some kind of two-player pinball machine. That would definitely make it worth a stop. How would you like me to carry you? And so, as Mrs. Hatter returns to Nexeneth in the arms of Fuchsia the newborn vampire, the camera pans to show the rugged beauty of the desert landscape. The imaginary music swells, and then it cuts to a title card that reads, After the break, a poem from one of the characters that has appeared in this episode so far. Try and guess who. And, as you are contractually obligated, you're listening to KWOU. Poems from the Void by Luce the Mildly Sad Man. Hello again. friend. To tell the truth, I had forgotten you. For a moment I clogged the cracks in my mind, but now you're here. Wrap me. It's all the same. Dust. It fills my lungs so that my breath is numb. Every worthless word dirt I dug up from death. I can't let go. Help me. I saw a man tumble into the void today, by a beetle-shaped man. I saw a man tumble into the void today. What am I to do? He said I was a catcher, perhaps I should catch him, true, but the void is not to be denied if indeed I am of Nexeneth. I can't bluff and say that nothing's just the stuff we've got to pay. It's tough, living on the edge like this, busy by our pledge like this. A mere plebeian like myself should plead the fifth and drive the wedge like this. Between what we are and what we do, I'm sorry to be divisive, but it's the only way to thrive and stay alive, to be decisive. So I let him go. I just hope that he can too. Dreams of Aluminum Sheep by the Highest Plain. Is the sky a pasture, where heaven's sheep do graze? The iron paradise of last year longing for the end of days, where aluminum sheep would wander free, their bellies sleek and full, ne'er afraid of fools like me to steal their steel wool. This is not a poem by the void. This is not a poem. Were you expecting one? A poem that doesn't matter by the desert tortoise. Sometimes I feel like I'm kidding myself. Sometimes I feel like the world's against me. Sometimes I feel like hitting myself. Sometimes I feel like y'all have fenced me. Sometimes I think that my feelings are false. Sometimes I think in endless circles. Sometimes I think up a macabre waltz. Sometimes I think while the rest of the world gurgles. Sometimes I tire of repetition. And other times it doesn't bother me much. What's the use of an I am if it's a fruit that I can't touch? I'm a tortoise. Deal with it. Whistle While You Work by Matt Brown. It truly is the simplest little itty-bitty things in life, like the simple joy of swinging a hammer or carving with a knife, or working with one's hands by blood, sweat, and tears, to really make a lasting impact on someone through the years. So whistle while you work, because in truth not all are blessed with that kind of self-assurance that comes from doing your very best at what you love, at what you do, and you'll find when the day is done, you'll finally have some peace and quiet in which to have some fun. Poem of Pain by a Vampiric executive board member. Ah, ah, ow, ooh, erg, ho, eat. Hey, maybe we could talk about increasing your monthly pay? My name is Augustine by Augustine. My eyes are open in the dark. I rise with the sunset. My breath is cold like mother made me. Little baby, you're no fun. Let us hold your helping hand. This ring is the future, unbroken for 1,000 years and counting. So far, so good. Your skin is blinding. I can't see what I used to see in me. Lofty, you drift in the wind above me and beam in my direction. My name is Augustine, and I am born anew. I resent your asking. The printer isn't working again by a vampiric industry coffinical worker. Should I help them? You Can't Outrun Your Story by Mrs. Hatter, the lady with a very large hat. I suppose I'm just tired. That's the long and short of it. I sort of gave my all trying to deny what was given and fly the coop I was driven to, but you have to go on living, too. Do I feel like a changed person? How am I supposed to know? I poised and posed at my post for years. You dragged me by the ear to here, and now there's nothing more to see. You clean me out for sure. I'm pure as pearls. The sea it cures all. Ah, you can hear my disingenuous engine hissing down the street a mile away. You know I can't lie to you. Just to myself. And others for when I get bored. You can't outrun your story, and I'm tired as hell, so glory, glory. Hallelujah. I'm here now. Thirst No More by Fuchsia, the newborn vampire. Am I the only one here not dying? Can't they tell? Can't they tell? 1,000 years, it's drying up the well. Fall down the well, and see the beauty locked within the soil. Royalty comes boiling forth and fills your sinuses. You sneeze and breathe the vapor's finest tinctures. Can you picture in your mind distinctly the stink of holy scriptures? Old faithful's always sulphurous. I'd gladly trade my soul for this. I'd gladly trade my soul for this. But can't they tell? Those sandpaper people pretending to know the ending, endoskeletons of balsa wood locked falsely in their closets, how claustrophobic are the lives you lead, you know not why you bleed. You were thirsty, like me, though the past tense is a luxury I can't afford. Such reductive structures of reality don't survive the deconstruction of vitality I mean to begin in this town. Your verve is no substitute for the words that you love to shoot straight out of the sky. Am I the only one here crying? I don't care about this poem by the desert. Seek refuge in my inhospitality. I have no agenda. I am objective, irrespective, and unfriendly to the end. I will not bow to your twists of mind, your worlds are but the wind to me. Even still, could you stop by and just wander a ways into me? I bet you weren't expecting a poem from everybody. Then again, life isn't always what we expect, and I believe I've made it abundantly clear that this story is to be as lifelike as possible. In any case, the poetry's over, and now the fun can begin. Matt, Brown, and Augustine have just finished redecorating the executive board meeting room, and thus are soaring through the choked Nexanothian sky to go find their beloved protagonists to terrorize. Their aerial survey discovers the presence of an airborne target, namely Mrs. Hatter aboard the skyship Fuchsia, and the four of them convene a quick sky council. Hello, Mrs. Hatter, and who might you be? Hello, Matt Brown, and who might you be? My name is Augustine, I'm a vampire. Well, howdy, my name's Fuchsia, and I'm also a vampire. Ain't it a small world? It seems like mortals are in the minority in this here Sky Council. Doesn't bother me, I'm already dead inside. Oh, stop it, you're beginning to sound like Luce. You're supposed to remain two distinct characters with unique conflicts and motivations, or lack thereof. Where is Luce, anyway? I know exactly where Luce would go. Augustine Luce is that other protagonist I was talking to you about. He and I are on very intimate terms. We can practically read each other's minds. You can do that? I can mesmerize people with my voice. I could mesmerize people with my left toe if I tried hard enough. Now follow me, my accomplices, to the only place Luce could possibly be. After a half-hour flight, the quartet stood in an arcade-themed dive bar in downtown Peripolis. Before them, blips and bloops, nothing more than a giant, two-player, tax evasion-themed pinball machine. Matt Brown kneels in awe. Where's Luce? Mrs. Hatter asks incredulously. Matt Brown sheds a single tear, then stands. Well, if he's not here, we can assume that he's dead. Any loser like him in his right mind would naturally gravitate to the sheer magnitude of the awesome waves being emitted from this thing at high frequencies. I mean, look at it. 2 players, head-to-head, pinballing it out. I could stay here forever. Actually, that doesn't sound like a bad deal. I find my new undead acquaintances slightly less insufferable than you. Your loss. I see no better way to grieve Luce's death than an all-night alcohol-suffused pinball tournament. After that, we steal this thing and go to nationals. It'll be great. Sure you don't want to join me? The women had already left. Matt Brown shrugged. First stage of pinball. Denial. So, Augustine, I hope you don't mind my asking, but how did you become a vampire? Oh, the same way everybody does, I suppose. A recruiter came to my high school and gave a little presentation. You? Oh, I wasn't aware that's how it usually happens. I turned into one after being consumed with rage at the author of the story. The what? Jasper, the author of the story we're in right now? Are you okay? Fuchsia sighed. Better than ever. Okay, so how are we going to find Luce? Mrs. Hatter said. Just split up and ask, I suppose, Augustine said. What does he look like? Mrs. Hatter thought for a moment. Young human male, appears middle-aged, scruffy, washed up, disheveled but still well-dressed, chiseled in a sort of sickly way, acts like it's always raining and talks like there's jazz in the background with a little smirk of self-satisfaction. Wow. Looks are very important to you. That's been well established, yes. If you could set me down next to that happiness dispensary, we could meet up in a few hours in the same place. Sounds like a plan. All right, ladies, let's find a protagonist. They set Mrs. Hatter down, and almost immediately the montage music began to play. They scoured through the city, asking every passerby if they had seen a mildly sad man. Mrs. Hatter talked with a foggy-eyed couple and their troop of children, out for an evening's crab walk. They had seen a sad man, though they were certain he was moderately sad. Fuchsia talked with a stray dog and a small collection of loose trash. They were wrapped up in a heated discussion of metaphysics as it relates to musicology, and so Fuchsia never got around to asking about their missing person. Augustine talked to an older spectacled fellow who smelled of watermelons and his pet emu. They were on their way to a pinball tournament out of town, and so were in a bit of a rush, and gave no information. The montage music coasted to a stop, and the three of them reconvened at the dispensary, disappointed, disjointed, and discouraged about the whole thing. Maybe he really is gone, Augustine said. Does that even happen to protagonists? Wondered Fuchsia. Just ending like that? I always thought the death of the protagonist was supposed to be wrapped up in the end of the story, if at all, and full of drama and meaning. Perhaps he's not really gone, and he'll return just at the right moment when everything seems lost. Yeah, that's it. That's what you're planning, aren't you, Jasper? Right? They were all quiet for a moment. Even the turtle who didn't matter. Maybe he wasn't a protagonist to begin with, said Mrs. Hatter. Maybe none of us are. They come and they go. I don't know what to tell you. There's not a clear-cut answer to all of this. I know you aren't really grieving Luce, you're grieving yourselves. And that's justified. I was terrified too when I was where you are, inside the 7 billion player pinball machine, but I swear it gets better somehow. I don't know how, but I do know that. Please, trust me. The turtle that didn't matter turned and walked away. As did Augustine and Mrs. Hatter. Fuchsia sat, put her head in her hands, and did not say goodbye. The camera zooms out of Peripolis, where the raucous sounds of pinball can be heard for miles, and it turns to face from whence they came, towards Nexana, towards the void. The distance we have from it somehow does not diminish its size. It seems to span the entire horizon in its empty embrace. It beckons, casually, like a stranger at a party who has the answers to the questions you want to ask, but were too afraid to. The camera begins to focus on something in the foreground and suddenly turns off. Just like that. Tune in next week for the next episode. I know we've had our differences, but I journeyed all this way to tell you that I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I'm Jasper Beck, and that this is the amazing, unbelievable adventures of Dr. Theophilius Crux, Ph.D., and his faithful companion Archibald, the Tasmanian emu. You're listening to KWOU.